Good afternoon. My name is Kande Yunkela. I am the co-chair of the Africa Europe Foundation.
Good afternoon. My name is Dimfna van der Lans. I am the CEO of the Clean Cooking Alliance, and I am honored to be joined here today by two amazing women who I have worked with for the last several years, who I'm hoping will inspire you and will continue to take you on the journey that we think is incredibly important, which is making sure that there's universal access to clean cooking solutions for families across the world. And so with that, we are looking forward to an engaging and inspiring conversation today. As I mentioned, I'm joined by two women. We will start by a conversation with Sheila Aparacia, who has been an inspiration for so many of us in the clean cooking sector over the, I think, almost 20 years that Sheila has been working in on sustainable energy and also on clean cooking. She's the international coordinator and program manager for Energia. And Sheila, maybe if we can start our conversation with you, and if you could share with us a little bit more about how important this year is, specifically with the high-level dialogue on energy and COP towards the end of the year, and then your thoughts and ideas that you would like to share with everybody on how important the gender dimension for clean cooking is, and to make sure that we're mainstreaming all of that, and women's leadership to make sure that we collectively achieve a sustainable energy transition. Sheila, over to you. Sheila, can you hear me? Hello? I think we may have lost Sheila, unfortunately. Chebet, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you, Dimfna. Can you
Wonderful. I can indeed. It's always so wonderful to see you. And as I said before, continue to be very inspired by your leadership and the work that you're doing on making sure that specifically in Kenya, families have access to clean cooking solutions. And so maybe, if it's okay with you, we'll start with you, Chebet, and you can share a little bit more as a woman and an entrepreneur in this particular sector. How are you really focusing on your business and how you're approaching the work that you're doing to make sure that the families that you're serving have access to clean cooking solutions? So maybe, Chebet, we can start with you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dimfna, for this opportunity. Thank you, EDD, so much for having us here today to have this discussion. I'm very passionate about clean cooking, and this is a great opportunity to really share to the world about a space that I have worked on for the last number of years. So for everyone, my name is Chebet LESAN. I am the founder of BrightGreen. BrightGreen is a startup that's based in Kenya, and we are working on turning biomass into clean cooking fuel for families across the Kenya, the East African region, and we started our work in Kenya. So currently we're based in Nairobi. I'm also privileged to be a part of the Women Leadership Network, which is the reason why I'm here today to share in this discussion. So it's such a privilege, Dimfna, to share alongside you and Sheila, because you've both been very fundamental, in the clean cooking space and in the energy space, and bringing women into this conversation. So I want to start by appreciating that, because you are the people who have created the environment for some of us to work. So thank you for that. I want to start by sharing about, as a grassroots entrepreneur, the effects of working in a space and working really on the ground and seeing the direct impact of the work that you're doing. So I'll touch a little on BrightGreen. So BrightGreen is basically exploring the potential of biomass, which is basically the farm wastes that happen to be left on the farm and are a nuisance to farmers. And we're looking at exploring that as a potential raw material to produce heating blocks that replace charcoal and firewood for homes, and also for business kitchens across the Kenyan across the East African region. And the opportunity that we're working on is very big. In Africa, for example, more than 70% of the population is using firewood or charcoal, and they are very heavily reliant on this. And I guess the big question really is, for how long are we able to sustain relying on our forests to enable us to cook? So that's the question that BrightGreen is trying to answer. And the home is really special to me because it's really the center of nutrition, it's the center of care, it's the center of upbringing for children and within our communities. And we find that cooking is such a primary activity in the home. And it's a fundamental to many, it's an input to many fundamentals in our society today. And unfortunately, we find a lot that clean cooking and improved cooking has been left out of many developmental conversations. So one of the things we realized early on as a startup, as BrightGreen, is that in order to really bring the change that we wanted to see, that we had to take up an advocacy role as well to highlight the plight of the vulnerable communities that we were serving alongside the solution that we were offering. So we became a company that speaks a lot about what we do because we realized that we needed to bring this conversation into the spaces that we had the opportunity to come into. And really, it's a space that has a lot of opportunity for growth, especially bearing in mind that different contexts across the globe have different needs when it comes to cooking. So Africa has been left behind in a sense because we are still relying on the most rudimentary forms of cooking. And there's a lot of opportunity for us to bring in other new forms and to what I like to call to carry up families up the ladder, even if it's a step up from where they were. That is an improvement, allow us to reach our 2030 goal, clean cooking for all families. Tell a bit on the potential for growth. I do really believe that there's potential for scale and very many more players to actually join this space. Of course, like many growing sectors, the clean cooking sector does have its challenges that we are currently working on. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity to be able to see a growth in the next number of years. And I want to touch on a few issues, especially when it comes to what I see in my space, for example, is that we need to come into the space where there's a general recognition of, the contextual differences that happen in different parts of the globe when it comes to cooking. I know currently the West is having a lot of conversations around moving away from LPG or moving a step up from LPG, whereas in Africa, LPG is actually the next big step for Africa. It's the next big thing, and it's what we are aspiring to as a continent. So the question here is, how can we challenge ourselves as the leaders and as the entrepreneurs in this sector to enhance our leadership and to enhance the conversations, to bring solutions that are sensitive and considerate of these contextual challenges? Because when we start solving the real challenges, that's when we start seeing a real difference in the community and the impact is clear. And I think a deeper understanding of this contextual issue would really open several channels for investment in this space. And of course, speaking about investment, this space could do with a lot more, result-based financing, patient capital that encourages early innovators like myself and other young innovators to take bigger risk. And risk capital will also increase the appetite, and we can see more vibrant and exciting ideas coming into the space. And there's of course a lot of collaboration, given that cooking is really an input for many other activities. So we're able to see what other applications and what other opportunities and collaborations can come out of this. I also think as a startup that our governments do have quite a big role to play in creating the environment that enables startups to really, get on the grassroots and really get the work done. In my country, Kenya, for example, we have made some headway, but we still have some way to go in developing policies and regulations that can move at what we call, the pace of innovators. And some of these issues look like, when it comes to incentives, like, for example, tax breaks and enabling environments that allow entrepreneurs to really do the work that needs to be done. I usually give the example of our product at BrightGreen BrightGreen. One of ours has a very promising ability to replace charcoal and firewood. However, currently it is listed as a standard product, and what this means is that it attracts several taxes, just like any other product. And it becomes very difficult to present a business case to an investor when the circumstances are not very favorable. So as an entrepreneur, I may be working out of passion, but in order to really bring a good amount of investment into this space, we need to create a good enabling environment that also encourages investors to come into this space. I know I have only around 5 minutes, so let me end by saying, maybe just circling back the conversation onto the role that women play, for example, like BrightGreen is playing in this space. One of the things that is very critical and that I have seen in my journey is that our biggest customers in this business are women. And this is not just representative of BrightGreen. This is actually representative of several domestic energy across the world. Women are really the biggest end users of domestic energy. And understanding their needs allows us to move the needle forward quickly and efficiently. But I think to be able to do that, there are certain elements we must put in place. And one of them is that we need to continue to bring women into the center of the conversation. We're trying to do that in our business by bringing women into our distribution chain, so that we're not just having them as end users, but we're also having them in the distribution chain. We're having them as distributors, and there's potential to even grow into manufacturers and possibly even innovators. So how are we really empowering more women to come to this space is something that I challenge myself as a business, and I also think that we should continue to do as an ecosystem. And another thing I think is absolutely fundamental is building communities of women in this space. I think when women see other women succeeding and doing making change in the space, it brings into life the possibility of their own abilities to be change makers, which is very encouraging. And I know, Dimta, my story today here it's because, of the doors that you opened for me and some of the opportunities that you've presented for us to even share our work on such platforms. So it's all about building a community and making sure that the work that is being done is being brought to the forefront and the impact is visible for the world to see. The opportunity we have to serve is very big. The challenge I put out to myself today and to other entrepreneurs and leaders, advocates and policymakers in the space is, what can we do to help, brilliant young minds in this space to fill the gap? Because the time is running out and I know we need all hands on deck. So thanks for allowing me to share. I'll stop there. I know I may have gone over time. So thanks for that, Dimna.
Thank you so much, Chebet. That was really wonderful. And I couldn't agree more that our job really is to make sure that we continue to elevate the voices of women in the space, both of users and the ones providing and creating the solutions that, such as yourself, so that they speak to the work that needs doing and the transitions that we're going through, which I think is really wonderful. I am really glad that Sheila was able to rejoin us, and I think you're able to hear me, and I can see you're smiling, so I'm assuming you are indeed. And so I would welcome the opportunity to hear a little bit more from you, Sheila, and then after that would like to see if we can sort of bring it back together and share a little bit more about what the Africa-Europe Foundation's manifesto is really focusing on, which actually addresses a lot of the things, Chebet, that you were already raising, sort of the sort of support that businesses and others need and governments need to continue to make sure that they can deliver on making sure families have access to clean cooking solutions. So we can circle back with that. But now that we have Sheila back, I would welcome you, Sheila, to join the conversation and share some of your observations and thoughts about why it's so important to make sure that we continue to focus on women and gender mainstreaming in our sector. Sheila, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dimfna. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's always a pleasure to share a platform with two great women that are role models for me, Chebet and yourself, Dimfna. Dimfna, let me just take off from where Chebet left and focus maybe on why the why question. Why is it important to look at the intersectionality of gender and clean cooking? And I'd like to do it, like I said, complementing what Chebet said, by looking at the impacts, focusing on what the impacts are. And maybe the impacts of the cooking energy poverty for women. So Dimfna, first of all, I think we're all aware, but it's worth reminding ourselves that the impact of cooking with solid fuel on women's health is really critical. We have 4 million premature deaths due to household air pollution. Secondly, I think equally important is also the time poverty that women experience and the opportunity cost that this entails. The unpaid care work they have in sourcing and procuring using these traditional fuels, but also that they're not able to engage in productive activities or even in education activities to improve themselves. I think it's also worth reminding ourselves that this is intergenerational. We're talking about grandmothers, we're talking about mothers, and we're talking about the girl child. So that it's impacting and limiting opportunities during every life stage of women having the lack of cooking energy. And we focus a lot on women's household energy needs, but very much in the productive sector, in women's productive activities, thermal energy plays a very big role. And the productivity of their businesses is impacted by not having access to modern energy, clean cooking services. But like Chebet had said, I think we really want to focus on, and you always say this, Dimfna, let's focus on solutions. And let's also focus on not just the problems and challenges that women have, but really where they are driving change. Chebet is an entrepreneur, and she provides, and many others provide a ready springboard that we can use for delivering energy services. And in fact, according to the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, Africa now has the highest growth in businesses that are started and are run by women. And these are businesses that can be brought into driving clean cooking solutions. Also, we see that there is a comparative advantage of working with women businesses, particularly in last mile communities, where they're able to establish distribution chains using their social networks in areas that commercial businesses do not operate. There's also a multiply effect that we find that women running clean cooking businesses, the economic benefits that they bring tend to be much more than men, tend to be used for improving their local economies, for including their families, for educating their for educating their children. Now, what does this mean when we talk about gender mainstreaming? Given this context, what is sort of a roadmap that we can use for actually using a gender approach or mainstreaming gender into the energy sector? And again, just complementing what was said earlier, creating enabling policy environment is really critical, so that we really need to see what we see as good practice and where we see trailblazers. For instance, Kenya, and the fact that Kenya is one of the leading countries. We've seen the greatest change Kenya is one of the countries where we've seen the greatest change since the introduction of the Sustainable Development Goal on clean cooking to date on scaling up clean cooking. One of the reasons is that Kenya is the only country that has a gender and energy policy for its sector. So really having gender responsive strategies is really important. And here, Dimfna, as we're going towards the COP, I think we really need to start integrating. We need to prioritize integrating both gender and clean cooking in the national determinant contributions. Again, investing, like Chebet said, really increasing investments in energy businesses is really important. And also, Chebet talked about creating jobs. I think that's really critical that we engage women in our in the job market, and also look at bringing women into our decision-making positions. Accountability, I'll just end by talking about accountability. I think all these measures and what we've said is important, but what you don't measure doesn't get done. So accountability for working on, for monitoring and setting targets for a gender transformation in the clean cooking sector is going to be important. We need to be collecting sex disaggregated data, and we need to be systematically collecting and reporting on our plans, on our implementation, and on the results that we're achieving with regards to gender equality and women's empowerment in the clean cooking sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. All duly noted, and I would welcome the opportunity to come back to you a little bit around the targets and where you've seen that work, and or maybe share a little bit more about where you've seen some of the integrated gender policies that are being created or have been created, for example, in Kenya. Like, how can we support other countries to replicate these kind of policies, and how can we make sure that they're firmly embedded within the governments that really are focusing on clean cooking solutions and clean cooking transitions. And maybe we've been referencing it a little bit already, but now would be a good opportunity to speak a little bit about the Africa-Europe Foundation's upcoming forum, where we will indeed be launching the Clean Cooking Manifesto. It is a really exciting and important document, I think, for the whole sector, because it really speaks to many of the issues that you all have already been addressing. But I would like to just highlight three of those. The first one is around just transition. And Chebet, I think you mentioned it already in the beginning of your intervention, where you shared that really at government levels, when governments feel that LPG is a viable option for them to transition to clean cooking solutions, they should be able to execute those plans and integrate that in their complete energy planning. And at the Clean Cooking Alliance and many of the partners, we firmly believe that sort of this self-determination at a country level is really, really important. And we want to support those countries, obviously, as much as we can with the international community to develop energy transitions that are just for them. Because although we all aspire to meet the 2050 goals of net zero, we also want to, and I'm hoping all of us aspire to doing that in a just way, so that those climate goals do not get delivered at the extent or at the expense of meeting some of the other development goals. And so really focusing on this just transition narrative, I think, is going to be really critically important, and it's a big part of the Clean Cooking Manifesto. The second one that I wanted to highlight is around the need to make sure that clean cooking ambitions are firmly embedded within the NDCs. Many of them are already delivered and have been developed, but if we move into the next phase of the NDC work, we can really focus on making sure that they're firmly embedded within the ambitions, and the implementation plans are firmly embedded within the NDCs. And that relates also to energy planning at a country level, to make sure that clean cooking isn't an afterthought anymore, but really integrated from the very beginning. And so that, again, is a big part of the Energy Manifesto, and one where we really feel that that narrative this year is so important for high-level dialogue on energy as well as COP. And then the last one is really around making sure that we collectively create strong markets. And we say this all the time as a sector: we need the enabling environment, we need the right policies, we need the right physical incentives. They have to be stable and they have to be smart. But I really encourage and want all of us to really focus on what that actually means at a country level and which markets we're talking about. Because unlike the distributed energy sector, where it's like really focused on one technology, for example, solar, in the clean cooking sector, we have many different technologies that we want to consider, and they should all be part of this just transition and the energy planning at a country level. And so to really be specific about the markets that we need to create, what that means for LPG, for electricity, what it means for ethanol, for biogas, and what it means for improved cook stoves. All of those have different requirements, and I think it's incredibly important this decade to really be specific when we speak about some of these solutions and the work that needs doing. And so we're honored to be part of the creation of the Clean Cooking Manifesto, and we really look forward to launching that at the Africa Europe Foundation's Forum on the 29th of June this year. And so the final thing that really is in there comes back to what Sheila and Chebet we're already talking about, which is this gender integration, and how do we move from just saying it's really important that we think about women both as users and as entrepreneurs to what else can we do as an ecosystem to support that work. And so Chebet wondered a little bit if you can speak to what you've seen, the power of mentoring, and how you have been mentored, and how you are now focusing on also mentoring other women in this sector, and the concept of reciprocity. And then maybe Sheila, you could follow up a little bit more with a conversation around what kind of targets should we actually be setting, and do you think are appropriate for us as we think about gender mainstreaming, and how can we help other countries do what Kenya has already been doing, which is really successfully integrating gender in their energy strategies. So maybe we'll start with you, Chebet, if you could share a little bit more about like what we can actually do to empower and strengthen the women who we know are leading in the sector.
Okay, thank you so much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
I hope. Okay, good. All right. Okay, Dimfna, that's such an important question. You know, when I think about mentorship, I think not only about mentorship from the people who have gone ahead of us, but I also think about mentorship from the people who we serve. So one of the most interesting things for us in our journey in BrightGreen is that some of the best ideas and some of the best solutions that we have implemented have come from women who we serve, our customers or our potential customers. And this has been interesting because they have such a deep understanding of the community and how it works, how the homestead works, how communities work, how communication channels work in different communities, that are such useful information for a startup and for a business to actually take off the right way. So we very early on in our business adopted a co-creation model where we would design products and services alongside these women, because they gave us insight that was so important in the different successes that we've had. And even in terms of the distribution into the product, the distribution into the markets, we've really leveraged on the existing relationships that women have with each other in the community, and the structure that they already have in place, that are structures of communication, of distribution, and leveraging on this has been one of the strongest success factors that we have relied on to really push out the product. So mentorship from the customer has also been very fundamental. But let me speak about also a mentorship from the women who have gone before me. I really strongly believe that BrightGreen would not be where we are today if it was not for the opportunities that had been opened and the doors that had been opened for us. I'll speak a little about when we first started, and I was actually introduced to the clean cooking sector by Wanjira Madai, and she mentioned about the potential of being in the community of the clean cooking, and that's how we started the journey with different women like yourself, Dimfna, and other great women that I've met in this space. And one of the biggest doors that was open for us was the Woman Entrepreneur of the Year Award, which was an initiative that was started by the Clean Cooking Alliance a number of years back. And it really opened the world and a platform for us to speak about the work that we were doing. And what this has done is it has moved away the conversation from just the clean cooking sector into other sectors outside the clean cooking space. And ideally, this is what we're really trying to do. We're trying to get clean cooking to be a conversation about an input to, the betterment of the society. It's not just us wanting to discuss amongst ourselves. So this has really been an opportunity for us that has enabled us to, speak more. Sometimes I find myself, thinking about our role and the role that we've played in advocacy and really talking about clean cooking. And I see now in hindsight how important it is to speak about the solution, to bring in the solution into tables that might not have necessarily, had that conversation if we were not in the room. So it's really been a privilege to receive these opportunities from the women around us. And I know and have received very many, well wishes from people who are also following our work at BrightGreen. We do mentor a number of young micro enterprises, and we're starting to see the effects of really having women see that it's possible for them to be part of the solution. It's possible for them to start something and actually create something and be a part of the change that they want to see. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chebet. That's really wonderful. And I had not realized that your original inspiration was Bandira. So that is really wonderful to hear, actually, who is on the leadership council for the Clean Cooking Alliance. So that's a really nice story. I hadn't realized that. Maybe, Sheila, we can move over to you if you don't mind sharing additional thoughts on sort of how we can really work with governments to make sure that they're able to deliver against very often ambitious targets that they're setting for themselves. Sheila, over to you.
Thank you very much. So I think, thank you for the question. I do think that we can work with governments, first of all, they are already best practices out there. I mentioned Kenya. Kenya has a gender and energy policy. We have Tanzania that also has a gender action plan for the SE4 action plan. In the ECOWAS region, they have a regional gender and energy policy, and they've even translated that into a legal framework. So there are good practices out there we can build on. Now, what has been the journey for getting these gender responsive strategies in the clean cooking sector that governments can learn from? I think the first thing is leadership's commitment, that political commitment to translate the national but also regional and international commitments into the clean cooking sector, and having that buy-in is really important. The second one is doing the due diligence. We can't. I don't want to overemphasize that it's really important that we do the gender assessments and do the gender analysis to understand the real issues on the ground and the context that different clean cooking the context of women and men's issues and needs within different clean cooking markets. The second is to just really develop a roadmap with regards to how we want to work with gender. I think one of the good practices from the electricity sector is that we've always had national electricity plans. And if I know the Clean Cooking Alliance is advocating for having clean cooking plans. So making those gender responsive and developing that roadmap is really important. And then building partnerships with women's groups, building partnerships with the gender machinery that's within countries who are very used to working with gender tools and approaches, and really can support the clean cooking sector to implement and deliver on those gender responsive roadmaps in the sector. I did talk about accountability and monitoring. I think that's really important, and I would even go so far as saying that I think we need to make it mandatory. The Climate Investment Funds makes it mandatory for any investor that receives money to actually report on gender, and this seems to be an incentive that really helps us move forward to delivering on our gender indicators. So really having that disaggregating data that we're collecting, both for men and women, but also having gender responsive indicators. Budgets. Very importantly, that we need to have intentional financing to deliver on implementing our gender action plans, and these need to be budgets that really make sense. They shouldn't be, we're not talking about token contributions. We're really talking about scaling up. If we look at the issue and the problems and related to the lack of clean cooking for women, then we need to have the same level of ambitious financing and budgets to resolve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Sheila. I think if I can just make sure that you remember to put that very good and passionate request in towards the end when we come back as to what do we actually want to see happening at the EU and the AU summit coming up. So please remember that one, because I do think it's important. Maybe two other things to bring in for the Clean Cooking Alliance as we think about the important role that women play in this sector is first one is to continue to really elevate their voices. And I think we so often say it, but we don't do it often enough. And so a real encouragement for the whole sector to continue to really speak that, and not just for the sake of saying it, but really believing it and living it constantly. And so as Chebet and Sheila will remember, at the Clean Cooking Forum that we hosted in Kenya, 2 years ago now almost, the final panel was an all-female panel that I thought was just one of the most impactful things that we had done within the clean cooking sector at that particular forum. And so really encourage everybody to continue to just get voices of the women, both of the people, the women who are using the solutions, but also the entrepreneurs, women who are working in policymakers like Phoebe in Kenya. There's so many inspiring stories out there, and I really want all of us to put those voices to the forefront. And then secondly, it is not easy for the companies that we're working with who are in our sector to really make sure that they're embedding gender policies within their own operations. And so I think it's always something that we assume should be relatively easy to do, but it is not. And so often they're smaller companies, they're startups, they're entrepreneurs, they're really struggling to make sure that they're creating the right margins for their products and continuing to grow and strengthen their businesses. And so with the Clean Cooking Alliance, we are now working with some of these companies to support them in embedding gender policies within their own practices. And again, I think this comes a little bit back to what you were saying, Sheila, is to say some of these things is relatively easy, and the assumption that it therefore then gets done is always out there, but all of that needs money and time and dedication. And I think that we as a sector have to move on from just saying these things and actually living it and doing it. So yeah, I'll stop there, but I think it's just so important to not just say that we would like to do these things, but making sure that they're actually happening. And so maybe as we're wrapping up, as I was alluding to earlier, if I can ask both of you to share one or two really specific asks and aspirations that you would have for the upcoming summit between the EU and the AU. And so maybe, Chebet, if we can start with you with one or two asks that you would have for that community to take forward. Chebet.
Okay, thank you, Dimfna. So let me speak as an entrepreneur here first. The entrepreneurship space is very difficult because there's very many things that we balance as entrepreneurs. Aside from solving a problem, we're also trying to stay sustainable, So one of my biggest asks today would be, I want to see our sector prioritized. I want to see that we are at the center of the conversations of energy, just like Sheila mentioned. Can we have a national cooking roadmap? Can we bring the cooking conversation closer home? Because it is a fundamental aspect of the betterment and the success of our society. So I want to see this support because it is what is going to enable us as entrepreneurs to move from running small businesses to growing these businesses and scaling them across different countries. So I'm really passionate that I want the conversation to start with governments. They need to create that enabling environment. We have many entrepreneurs like myself. We are young, we are vibrant, we have the energy to do the work. We need that support so that we're able to pull in that investment to be able to grow our businesses and make the impact that we all want to see. That's my ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Chebet. Sheila.
Yeah, so Dimfna, I would say the time is right. So my key ask would be an ask for political leadership in this area. And why I say the time is right is that I think Coming out of the pandemic, we do find countries are developing recovery plans and strategies and also focusing on resilience. But when we've had such a crisis, it also provides an opportunity for us to really be bold and disruptive in our policies and commitments. The time is also right because we have many platforms apart from the upcoming Africa Union and EU Forum. We have the high-level dialogue on energy. We have COP26 coming out. We have the EED that we're participating in now. We also on June 9th had the first meeting of the high-level coalition on health and energy. So we have many opportunities where our political leaders can really show that bold leadership to advocate for not just a sustainable future, but also for an inclusive and just transition. And an inclusive and just transition, like Chebet said, is one that really places women at the center of the transition. So my ask is for our political leadership to be bold, to be ambitious, and to address what is a persistent and ongoing challenge, and to use this opportunity to do so.
Thank you, Sheila. I think all of those are just really wonderful asks for this particular community. If I can add my own last one as we wrap up this, as always, wonderful and inspiring conversation with the two of you, is for the policymakers and the leaders who will be gathering to really start with talking about clean cooking. In the conversations around access to energy, we have to start with clean cooking because it is the biggest issue, right? Still the biggest issue that is mostly underfunded, that has not received enough traction and commitment and attention. And it will stay that way if we don't start focusing on clean cooking and access to clean cooking every single time we have conversations around energy access. And so I firmly believe that flipping that narrative and focusing and refocusing ourselves and our attention and our funding and our resources on clean cooking, first and foremost, will make such a significant impact on us collectively achieving universal access to energy. And so I am hopeful and encouraged by this conversation. And I'm hopeful and encouraged by what we see in our sector as increased leadership, increased passion, increased energy to make sure that we collectively ensure access to clean cooking for families across the world. And so with that, I want to thank my two other panelists for joining today and in this conversation. As I said, it's been a real honor and it's been such a tremendous journey to be on with the two of you. And I look forward to many more years with both of you. And so with that, thank you both so much. Thank you everybody for participating and for listening. And we look forward to seeing many, if not all of you, very, very soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.